G'day guys, Alex Sports Physio here. Today we're talking about all things Achilles tendonitis, or what we call an Achilles tendinopathy. We'll be talking about what it is, how you get it, and how you can assess and treat it yourself at home for free, as well as clearing up any misinformation that is out there about this condition. Let's get into it.
So let's talk anatomy. Now we know that every muscle has a tendon, and the Achilles tendon has two muscles which feed into it. The first and one we're most familiar with is the gastrocnemius, which is the big calf muscle on the back of the leg. Now this muscle is most active when our leg is straight and we're doing explosive things like sprinting, whereas the soleus, the second muscle, lives underneath the gastroc, and it's most active when our knee is bent and doing activities like jogging.
So guys, with an Achilles tendinopathy, the hallmark signs are the more exercise they do, or the more demanding exercise they do, the more sore they get. So it might be that they can walk for 5 kilometers and they're fine, but at that 6th and 7th kilometer, the symptoms start to come on, meaning that their tendon's capacity is not there and they're fatiguing and they're getting sore because they don't have that endurance in the tendon. Similarly, it might be that the more demanding tasks they do, once again, so walking is easier than jogging, which gets sore, and then once they start running or sprinting or jumping, it's even more sore again. So there is that load relationship present.
So we're just going to take a break here for a moment, guys, so that you can see if you can do this sort of testing at home to see if there is that load relationship present with your injury.
So guys, in the clinic when I'm diagnosing someone with an Achilles tendon, we want to see if there is that relationship that we spoke about before, that the more you ask of the tendon, the more sore they should get. Therefore, we're doing a 2-foot calf raise. They should be getting a little bit sore, or maybe not. But by doing a single leg calf raise, they should be getting more sore again. By hopping on the sore leg, they'll be getting even more sore. And then explosive jumping should make them even more sore again, and if this is the case, we can have a more stronger argument that they do have an Achilles tendinopathy issue. Quite similarly, if they're reporting things like walking gives them a little bit of pain, but running gives them more pain, and sprinting gives them more pain even still, that also supports the notion that they do have an Achilles tendinopathy type pain. If they have more of a compressive tendinopathy, you might find that if they report, well, it's more sore when I walk uphill and their ankle's in this dorsiflexion position, which means that they're getting more compression. That's also another little bit to strengthen the argument that this is the type of tendon issue you might have.
So now we're going to get into some examples of the types of Achilles tendinopathy pain you can get, specifically an acute or reactive tendon pain, or the longer term chronic type of Achilles tendon pain.
Quite often people get this presentation, quite often is they've had a period of time off and then they've gone back into hard exercise straight away. So the last month they've done not a lot and then straight back into hard exercise again. Maybe it's a New Year's resolution, maybe they're just trying to get fit again and they run into this problem. Or it might be someone that is an established athlete and they're quite fit, but they've had a 2-week break and they're back into that same level of training. So they're intense, 2 weeks off, intense, and it's that 2 weeks off that's preceded their pain. And also it might just be that their training's been ramping for quite some time. It's gotten harder and harder and harder. And eventually the capacity is just not handling the constant jumps in their training load, and that they might require a period of time to plateau out, adapt to the new amount of training that they're doing, so they just get strong doing a certain level and then they can go up again once they've adapted to that level of training.
So essentially,
get what we call a reactive tendon when the Achilles gets inflamed and sore. What we can do here for this person is just try to just reduce that level of exercise, let it calm down and then build up slowly, and for the most part these people have a very quick recovery. Or we fall into column B, where we've been persisting with this pain for quite a number of years or months, and we have what we call a chronic tendinopathy, or for some people a chronic tendonitis. What this means for this person is that they're in this downward spiral of, I get pain, I rest a little bit, and then I go back to exercising again. But I get sore again, so I rest a little bit. And as they rest each time, the calf and the tendon gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And they try to keep exercising and it gets more sore, so they take more rest off and they just keep going down this painful, aggravating spiral, and they end up with a very chronic tendon. And we're going to go through a patient case with this as this is a very common injury for some people. So now guys, let's get into where we might actually see or have pain if we have an Achilles tendinopathy. So where in the base of our foot do we get pain if we've got an Achilles tendinopathy? Well, the two most common places is one, a mid-portion tendinopathy, where when exercising we get pain around this mid-portion of the Achilles here, which is quite sore to touch most often, especially in an acute presentation. And in a chronic presentation, although it may or may not be sore to touch, it quite often is thicker. The actual tendon itself is thicker in width compared to the other side. Now the second subcategory that we have is a compressive tendinopathy. Now what this is pain more towards the base of the heel, especially when we're doing inclined activities or any activities that requires our ankle to be in dorsiflexion or in an upwards position as seen here. Because what happens is that Achilles has to wrap around the base of the heel there and can be stressed by being in that position. So those are the two main categories that we'll be talking about today and the most common that you'll get with an Achilles tendinopathy.
So let's take a look at someone that actually has an Achilles tendinopathy. So what we can see here is that Jeff has left-sided Achilles pain that gets worse when he runs longer distances. He has thickness of his left Achilles as seen here, with pain over the mid portion when we touch it, but no pain at the base. So at the moment we're sort of thinking this is a mid portion chronic Achilles tendinopathy. He's got 3 centimeters of thickness on the left-hand side and then 2 centimeters of thickness on the right-hand side, which is a pretty reasonable finding, which tells us that this has been a chronic ongoing issue as it's a third bigger on his left compared to his right. When chatting to Jeff further, he tells me that he's got a long history of pain with that Achilles for a number of years and that he started to get even more pain lately, but a decrease in power on his left side, which is the main reason that he came in. So now let's go on to look at Jeff when he's exercising. So what we can see here, he's light on his feet, there's not much sound when he lands, and he's getting good propulsion in the air. So let's have a look at what he's like on his injured leg. So we can hear from Jeff straight away that the sound is heavier. He's not as springy on that side. You can hear that he fatigues out quite quickly at the end there. So what we can see with someone like Jeff here is that he's heavier, meaning that he's weaker. He's using his left quad on his injured side to help throw himself up, as well as his opposite leg as well to generate that upwards force. So now this is something that you can do at home. You can video yourself, watch yourself hop and see if there's any differences. And we might want to go further and actually test each muscle, the gastroc and soleus, individually. And there's a video that'll show you how to do that here. So in this video, we're looking at Jeff on his right leg, working his soleus muscle because his knee is bent in this situation. And as we can see here, he's got nice big calf development on that side. He's nice and strong. Now when we get to his left leg, which is his injured side, you'll notice that he's actually quite smaller through his calf as well as the Achilles being thickened, and that he's quite shaky and weak on that side. So once you've worked out how weak you are with your own injury, which once again you can do through that ankle assessment video of mine, which will tell you how weak you are on your injured versus your uninjured, and then it'll give you the exact number of reps that you need to get back to, plus a little bit more to protect yourself from further injury in regards to strengthening your calf. So you'll probably be quite surprised with the difference that you'll find, as we found with Jeff here, even when doing just bent knee soleus raises, which we'll get to in a second. He was quite shaky even when he's got his right leg helping out with his left. Also found in that ankle assessment video is just looking at how much flexibility you have through your actual ankle joint itself. Although it's not a predictive factor of an Achilles injury, it's still important to have a nice healthy ankle joint that moves well. So once again, please go through and do that assessment to find how flexible you are, because if you have deficits here, we want to address them as well.
Now, how we decide, well, how much can I do? Generally speaking, the idea the tendon can take a little bit of punishment, that's fine. So if we think 0 is no pain and 10 is the worst pain imaginable, so this sort of scale, so 0 is good, 10 is the worst pain imaginable, somewhere up to about a 5 we consider to be a pretty okay level of discomfort to exercise to. So when you're jogging or walking or running, we're happy for you to exercise to that point in time, but then we need you to rest after that point in time to let it settle, as we don't want your pain over the week to snowball. So if you exercise to a 5 out of a 10 on a Monday, and then you try to exercise straight away Tuesday morning, less than 24 hours later, and it's now a 6 or a 7 out of 10, and then you try again on the Wednesday, it's a 7 or 8 out of 10, you're snowballing your pain. We don't want that. So the first part of the rule is less than a 5 out of 10 pain. The second thing is the 24-hour rule that I like to go by, which is I want your pain to have got back to that baseline level of discomfort. So that might just be that resting level of 1 or 2 that you've got, or maybe even if you're lucky and it's a 0 out of 10 pain, but you're back to that baseline level of pain that's normal for you before you start exercising again. So this is generally around 24 hours later. So if you exercised at 5 p.m. on a Monday, 24 hours is obviously 5 p.m. on the Tuesday. Now, if this hasn't occurred, which is fine, it's not panic stations, I would just take a further 12 or 24 hours before you start your next bout of exercise. Now, we want to have as many regular bouts of exercise as we can, as long as we're not snowballing or perpetuating your pain, because the more positive interactions your tendon has over the course of the week, the better you're going to be, because you're going to get stronger, your tendon's going to adapt, and you're going to get back to doing the things that you want to do faster.
So now that we know we can exercise to less than a 5 out of 10 pain, and as long as the pain settles within that 24 to 48 hour period, let's see how we can do this at home. Well, believe it or not, exercise is going to be how we help to reduce your pain the most. An isometric is a isolated or just a hold of an exercise. So in this case, we're doing a calf raise, where we raise up with 2 feet and just hold at the top. And 4 lots of 40 seconds regularly throughout the day for some people has been shown to help reduce their pain. Once you can do this quite comfortably with 2 legs, we want to progress onto 1 leg, keeping in mind we want to be less than a 5 out of 10 pain as we're doing it. But as you do the sets, you should start to warm up. So by the 2nd or 3rd set, you should start to get that improvement in your pain symptoms. However, not everyone will actually get better by doing these holds, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, how you're going to get better long term is by getting into your strength rehab. So we'll just skip that part for some people and just get straight into doing our 2-foot calf raises to get some early work into the tendon. And specifically, we want to target our gastroc and our soleus muscles. So that means bent leg and straight leg exercise for our calf. Now just make sure you keep nice and consistent speed when doing your calf raises. You don't want to be flopping around like a fish when you're doing them, because with speed, tendons can get a little bit more aggravated, so just be nice and consistent. Start with 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 15 reps to improve our strength and endurance, making sure that we stay below a 5 out of 10 pain. I would continue doing this on 2 feet until you can achieve this goal of 15 reps per set, and then we want to progress on to single leg calf raises to increase the demand on the tendon, repeating the same number of sets and reps, starting at 8, building up your endurance until you get to 15, and then we want to progress you again with even harder exercises. Now guys, I understand there'll be some people that find it quite difficult to make the transition from 2-foot calf raises to single leg calf raises, and the answer is simple. We just want to employ normal progressive overload techniques. So just grab a weight which makes you overall heavier, which means your tendons have to work even harder during your 2-foot calf raise exercise. And we can just increase this weight as much as we need to until you can start to make the successful transition onto single leg calf raises. Similarly, another little step progression is a eccentric calf raise, which you go up with 2 and then go down with 1. So going up with 2 feet and coming down on the injured side. And we repeat this as many times as we have to, and we can even add weight to this exercise as well to help build up the strength in the calf until you can make the transition to just up and down single leg calf raises. Now guys, don't get confused. We're only doing these bridging exercises to get us to the single leg calf raise. And then once we can do that, we can make that exercise even harder, which is the main goal at the moment. Examples of this are getting up onto a box so that your heel has to drop down further, increasing your range of motions, which is one example of making it harder. From here, we can go another level and add a weight. So we've got the increased range of motion plus the weight to make the exercise twice as hard, but you don't have to increase every variable. You can just pick one. So it might just be you go from the floor and increase the weight, or we go to the box because you don't have weights at home. We just want to keep progressing and making our single leg calf strength better until such time that you can return to sport. Now, of equal importance is strengthening the soleus muscle, which is the other calf muscle we mentioned earlier, as it has a really important role to play when doing activities such as running. Now, we can set up in a bench type position or with an actual seated calf raise machine. We want to make sure that our legs are roughly at 90-degree position here, putting weight on top. Start with 15 to 20 kilos on single leg. It should be quite tolerable for the majority of people. Now, you don't have to have a fancy little setup with lots of weights. What you can do is grab a solid empty box at home and just start putting objects in that have some sort of weight to them, whether it's water bottles or bags of rice or what have you. Weight is weight in this situation. We just want to keep strengthening our calf, and by extension, we'll start to strengthen our tendon. So 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 15 reps is how we want to start, but eventually we want to start doing less reps and increasing the weight, because this will make the tendon get stronger faster. We should have a goal of getting down to even up to 3 to 4 sets of 6 repetitions to really get some good strength work into that Achilles tendon and make our calf nice and strong. We can employ this same approach for when we're doing our standing calf raises by just holding onto a dumbbell or some other type of weight. The other example that we have for strengthening our soleus is in a standing position, makes it nice and easy to do at home. Now we can start in a 2-foot position. Now the key is to keep your knees bent and only let movement occur at your ankles. So knees stay stationary, pushing through the feet, getting good extension up onto your tippy toes. Once you can tolerate, similarly, 8 to 15 reps of this with 2 feet, we then want to go on to doing one leg bent knee calf raises, building up to 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 15 reps. We can then go on and hold onto a weight like we did with our standing calf raises to make the exercise more challenging. So now that we've started to build up a really good base strength, which we want to continue to do through the rehab process, we then need to start to strengthen our tendon elastically. What I mean by that is doing things like hopping and jumping and things that actually relate to the activity that you want to get back to in the first place. So we can't just do calf raises and then expect we can go back to sprinting. There's just too much of a jump. So what we want to do is have some little bridging exercises that allow us to get back to that higher level of function. So definitely within this phase, we can start to get you back into your sport, because training for your sport's a great way to get that elasticity and that springiness back into your Achilles. We've just got to be careful about how much of your sport you allow yourself to do. So I recommend we start with 2-foot hops, trying to build up a decent level of endurance. Maybe it's a 50, maybe it's 100 2-foot hops without too much increase in our symptoms, definitely less than that 5 out of 10 pain. We can then progress on to doing single leg hops. Once again, picking a number 50 to 100, something like that, trying to build up that endurance. And then we make it even harder again. We might be doing more explosive hops because you're a basketball player or a long jumper or someone that requires more explosiveness. So we need to factor that into your training and do it as a rehab exercise. Examples of this are hopping for distance, as seen here. You might start off with just a meter square on the ground, hopping forward and back, increasing the number of hops that you can do before your symptoms come on. Once again, making sure to keep it less than a 5 out of 10 pain and letting your tendon recover for 24 hours between bouts of this type of exercise. We can then make this harder by increasing the distances to which we jump or the height which we make ourselves jump. We can do this by just jumping higher or adding like a box jump to incorporate into our training. The amount of exercise progressions is really determined on the harder or the highest level of exercise that you have to be able to do, or how irritable your tendon is. You might have to take lots of little jumps to get back to where you need to be, or if you're a bit younger, you can probably take bigger jumps. But if you're someone that's a high jumper or a long jumper or someone that has these really big, long, explosive jumps, you're going to have to do that as part of your rehab process. But luckily, that can probably just be going to sport, going to training, and doing your specific sport at training to get that sort of high level exercise in. But please just start with a level of jumping which you're able to do for a reasonable number of reps. So that might just be the 2-foot hopping, it might just be the single foot hopping to start, and then just naturally progress by difficulty, and then just naturally progress by the number of jumps. You don't have to pick the hardest exercise to get better. You just need to pick the one that you can tolerate, get good at tolerating that exercise, and then progress to the next harder variation without flaring yourself up too much. And so the amount of jumps that you have to do to get back to your sport is really dictated on, well, how much does your tendon need to be able to do? And you just got to keep training, keep getting stronger, keep improving the difficulty of the exercises, keep improving the number of hops that you're doing until you are getting back to not only participating, but also getting back to your level of performance that you expect of yourself. So that might be how fast that you can run the 100 meters, that might be how fast your kilometers per hour is, that might be the number of tackles in a rugby game, how many rebounds in a basketball game, as the limiting factor is your Achilles' ability to perform. So you just need to keep training it until you get back to that same level. I do encourage people to exercise their Achilles that little bit harder than what they might think they need to, as this will give you what greater capacity than what your sport or exercise requires, meaning that you'll protect yourself, hopefully, from further injury by being stronger than you need to be.
Hey guys, so I just really want to touch on medications and specifically anti-inflammatories and Achilles tendonitis, or the tendinopathy that we're calling it, okay? Now, I'm no authority and definitely don't know as much as someone like a pharmacist or a doctor. However, it is certainly something we should talk about. Now, it would make sense. Well, Alex, why don't I take anti-inflammatories? I've got an inflamed tendon that makes me feel better. And although that relationship exists, it does make you feel better. It's not actually allowing your body to heal. Inflammation is inherently a good thing. What it does is allows the body to actually start the healing process. And if you keep taking anti-inflammatories, you're sort of knocking that healing process on the head and stopping it from actually occurring and allowing yourself to get better. Off-the-shelf paracetamol has a lot less side effects than an anti-inflammatory, as it can obviously upset your guts, but also stops the healing process. A paracetamol, for example, is a much safer alternative. Now, I'm not telling you to take anything, but if you are considering that you do want to have help, you need to go and chat to a pharmacist or chat to a GP or a sports GP or a doctor, someone that knows what they're talking about with regards to drug interactions. But please don't self-medicate yourself anti-inflammatories trying to get your tendon better. And this goes for all types of tendons, not just your Achilles tendon. It goes for tennis elbows, it goes for fingers, any sort of tendon in the body. This sort of evidence rings true for. So more of just a public service announcement with regards to your Achilles. We actually want the pain to be there because that's going to help us with regards to your exercise prescription and getting you better.